Dust Creek lay quiet under the dying sun, its wooden storefronts glowing like embers in the heat that still clung to the air. The frontier had a way of swallowing sound, swallowing hope, swallowing men, and today it felt hungrier than usual. Red dust drifted across the empty street in thin curls, dancing around wagon ruts and dry tumbleweed as if the earth itself were restless. A dry creek bed cut through the western edge of town, nothing but cracked mud and scattered bones, reminders of seasons that never came. Folks here had grown used to the silence, but lately even the wind seemed to whisper warnings. Word had carried from ranch to ranch, mine to mine, that the gang calling themselves the Red Vultures had set their sights on Dust Creek. Nobody knew when they'd strike, only that they would. And when trouble chose a place to bleed, it didn't ask permission. A stagecoach rattled through earlier that morning, its driver pale as river chalk as he told the sheriff he'd seen riders on the ridge. 5, maybe 6, maybe more. Vultures, he called them, wiping sweat from his brow. The name fit. They didn't come for cattle or coin alone. They came for dominance, for the cruel sport of watching good people crumble. Dust Creek had survived droughts, failed harvests, and Apache raids, but the thought of the Red Vultures riding down their street made even the boldest mother clutch her child a little tighter. By late afternoon the town's nerves were stretched like rawhide. Doors stayed shut, shutters half-closed, eyes peering through thin slivers of safety. And beneath all that tension was something else, fear that tonight might be the night everything changed. It was near sundown when the stranger appeared, a lone silhouette trudging along the shimmering horizon. He walked instead of rode, which in these parts wasn't common unless a man had lost his horse or preferred his own company too much to keep one. The fading sun caught the silver threading his beard, and his shadow stretched long behind him like a weary companion. His frame was lean but not fragile, the kind shaped by years of desert trails and cold mountain nights. His coat, long and dust-coated, shifted with each slow step, hiding whatever life had carved into him. A battered hat sat low on his brow, the brim curled and darkened by storms long past. A few townsfolk watched him from porches and windows. They whispered among themselves, "Who's that? What's he want?" The way people do when they sense a man is more than he appears. But most simply looked away, deciding they already had enough trouble without inviting more inside their walls. A pair of ranch hands chuckled as he limped by, nudging each other with the kind of mean humor that grows from boredom. "Old-timers lost," one muttered. "Ain't no place for relics." The stranger didn't respond. He didn't need to. His slow, steady stride was answer enough. He was a man with no hurry left in his bones. He pushed open the saloon doors just as twilight spread purple across the sky. Inside, piano keys fell silent for a moment, boots paused mid-tap, and the scent of tobacco thickened in the air as the stranger entered. Dust Creek Saloon wasn't a loud place to begin with, but now a hush pressed over the room like a heavy blanket. The bartender, a stout fellow with a nervous mustache, eyed him with cautious curiosity. A group of cowboys rolled dice in the corner, their laughter fading into wary glances. No one recognized the drifter, but something about the way he moved commanded notice without demanding it. He took a seat at the bar, hands calm, posture unthreatening, yet everyone noticed the quiet tension in his shoulders. He asked only for water, voice low, gravel folded into each word. The bartender nodded and fetched it, while more eyes drifted toward the old men as if drawn by something they could feel but not name. That was when Jace Riker swaggered in, Dust Creek's youngest headache, and the kind of man who mistook cruelty for charisma. He wore his pistols low and his grin high, a hotshot outlaw in the making, eager for someone to witness his spark. When he spotted the drifter, he smirked wide enough to show every crooked tooth. "Look what wandered in," Jace crowed, loud enough for the whole saloon. "Ain't you a little old to be hobbling around these parts, Grandpa?" A few men chuckled, eager to stay on Jace's good side. The drifter didn't react. He sipped his water. That only made Jace bolder. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Jace jeered, stepping closer, thumbs hooked in his gun belt. "You deaf, old-timer? Or just slow?" The drifter set his cup down, gaze still fixed ahead. Jace slapped the bar beside him, leaning in so close the drifter could smell last night's whiskey on his breath. "Come on now," he sneered. "Ain't you got any fire left? Or did the desert dry you out like the rest of the fossils wandering the frontier?" Slowly, so slowly the room felt a movement, the drifter lifted his eyes. They were pale, steady, unreadable, like moonlight reflecting off still water. The saloon hushed once more, waiting. His voice, when it came, was soft enough that only those closest heard it, but heavy enough that the silence carried it across the room like a dropped stone in a quiet lake. "Son," he said, "you don't know the graves I've filled." A ripple of unease passed through the saloon. Jace's smirk faltered, though his pride forced a scoff. "Yeah, that's so," he muttered, trying to sound amused. But the drifter's words stuck to him like burrs. Before Jace could spit out another insult, a faint rumble shivered through the wooden floorboards. The sound was distant at first, like thunder rolling over distant canyons. The bartender froze mid-polish. Dice stilled in trembling hands. Someone muttered a curse. The rumble grew louder. Hooves. Many of them. The drifter turned his head toward the window, the way a wolf might when it recognizes the footsteps of another predator. Outside, the dust began to rise, swirling into a rough cloud of red that caught the lantern glow. Jace swallowed hard. "No, that ain't." The first riders emerged through the haze like shadows born from the desert. Dark coats. Red bandanas. Rifles slung easy over shoulders. Their horses snorted, stomping the ground as if they too understood the weight they carried. One by one, the red vultures lined the street in front of the saloon, silent, patient, confident in the fear they sowed. In the center sat Clay Varner, their leader. Tall, sharp-featured, eyes like flint that had never met a spark they didn't want to strike. Clay surveyed Dust Creek with a smirk, like a man examining a carcass before carving it open. He dismounted with slow, deliberate steps, boots thudding against the earth. He called out, voice smooth as a blade. "Listen up, folks. Dust Creek belongs to us now. You'll pay your tribute, you'll show your respect, and maybe, just maybe, you'll live to see next month." Inside the saloon, fear crept along the edges like a cold draft. Chairs scraped. Breath caught. No one moved. Except the drifter. He stood, quiet as dusk, eyes locked on Clay Varner with a steady focus that unsettled even those who stood behind him. Something in his gaze sharpened, not with anger, but recognition, like a man seeing a storm he'd known once before. Yet no one in Dust Creek had any idea why the sight of the red vultures didn't shake him. No one understood why he watched them with the calm of a man meeting fate, not fear. And no one knew that the past he carried had just ridden back into his life. By sunrise, Dust Creek was no longer just nervous, it was broken. Clay Varner had made sure of that. His men rode through the streets like wolves in a chicken yard, laughing as they overturned barrels, shot into the air, and ripped signs from storefronts. They burned a wagon in front of the mercantile just to prove they could, the flames licking high and bright while townsfolk stood helpless in doorways. The sheriff tried to intervene once, stepping into the street with trembling hands resting on his belt. Clay dismounted slow, deliberate, and walked right up to him. "You looking to be a hero, lawman?" he asked. The sheriff couldn't speak. His badge caught the morning light, a fragile glint of brass against the darkness pressing in. Clay slapped him hard enough to send the man sprawling, then plucked the badge from his chest. "You don't need this anymore," he said, tossing it into the fire. The crowd said nothing. The air stank of smoke and shame. That was how Clay Varner liked it, fear thick enough to taste. By afternoon, the gang had claimed the saloon as their headquarters. Women hurried their children indoors, men looked away, and hoped behind drawn curtains. Only one figure moved through the wreckage without hurry, the old drifter. He walked down Main Street carrying a small sack of supplies and a quiet expression that didn't match the panic around him. When he passed the church, a young widow was struggling to lift a crate from her wagon bed. He stopped beside her without a word and set it down for her as easily as if it weighed nothing. She was small, auburn-haired, her eyes tired but fierce, Mara Ellison, the blacksmith's widow. Everyone in town knew her husband had been gunned down months ago when he refused to shoot Clay Varner's horses for free. She had spoken since then only when she needed to, and smiled never. "Thank you," she murmured, brushing her hands on her skirt. "Not many offer help these days." The drifter nodded. "Not many ask." She studied him for a moment, curious. There was something about the way he moved, measured, deliberate, like each motion had been trained long ago and never forgotten. His hands, when he lifted the crate, had steadiness most men lost with age. Even the way he set it down, soft, exact, made her wonder. "You're new to Dust Creek," she said cautiously. "Passing through." "Wasn't planning to stay," he replied, glancing toward the smoke rising from town center. "Looks like the place could use a hand, though." Her lips thinned into something close to a smile. "A hand won't be enough against them." He said nothing, just looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. There was weight behind those pale eyes, like he'd seen too much of the world to believe in easy victories, or in running from hard ones. Later that evening, when the sun hung low and the gang's laughter carried down the streets, Mara found him again sitting on the edge of the old well, cleaning a revolver that looked older than some of the men who'd mocked him the night before. The metal gleamed, worn smooth by time, but it was well cared for, too well for a man who claimed no business with guns. "You handle that like a gunsmith," she said quietly. "Like someone who's seen enough of him," he answered without looking up. "They say Clay Varner's crew's been riding these parts for near 2 years. Killed plenty. Took more." He gave a small nod. "I've heard worse stories. And met worse men." She hesitated before asking, "What kind of men are you, Mr. Crow?" he said simply. "Elias Crow." She nodded. "Well, Elias Crow, Dust Creek could use men who ain't afraid of the dark." He holstered the gun with slow precision. "Fear's what keeps most alive," he said. "But sometimes, it's what kills the rest." That night, as lanterns flickered dimly behind shuttered windows, whispers drifted through the town. The new stranger, some said, wasn't a drifter at all. Someone recalled a story from Abilene, Kansas, years ago, a man who'd ended a blood feud between 2 ranch dynasties, not with law but with 6 bullets and silence. They called him the Ghost of Abilene, a gunfighter who'd won every draw and disappeared soon after. Some swore he'd died. Others said he'd hung up his irons and vanished into the wilderness, tired of killing. The more Mara thought about the steady hands, the quiet stare, and the weight in Elias Crow's voice, the harder it was to ignore the possibility. She wanted to ask, but something in his demeanor warned her off. Some truths carried blood behind them. When morning came, Clay Varner's men grew bolder. They rode through the outskirts, taking livestock, demanding payment for protection. One of them, Riker's younger brother, wild and reckless, dragged a ranch boy into the street after catching him hiding a sack of flour. The kid couldn't have been older than 12. They mocked him, pushed him, one finally kicking him into the dirt. The townsfolk watched from a distance, paralyzed by the memory of the sheriff's humiliation. Mara stood on her porch, fists clenched, heart pounding. Then she saw Elias step out from the shadow of the general store. He walked toward them like a man crossing a shallow river, calm, unharried, the morning light glinting off his coat buttons. The gang laughed. "Look who's come to save the pup," one sneered. "Old man's got a death wish." Elias stopped a few paces away. "Let him go," he said quietly. The outlaw grinned, showing yellow teeth. "And if we don't, then I'll make you wish you did." That made them laugh harder. Even the boy on the ground glanced up, disbelief mixing with hope. One of the men stepped forward, twirling his revolver like a toy. "You talk mighty big for somebody halfway in the grave." Elias's face didn't move. "You're not the first to say that." "Yeah," the outlaw said. "And what happened to the others?" Elias's eyes darkened, that eerie stillness returning, the same that had silenced the saloon. "They stopped talking, Dot." The laughter faltered. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then the outlaw cursed, lunging to shove him. The drifter's hand moved, not fast, just precise. He caught the man's wrist mid-swing, twisted, and in one smooth motion disarmed him. The revolver landed in Elias's palm as though it belonged there. He spun it once, old habit, muscle memory, and handed it back, grip first. "Don't touch the boy again," he said. The outlaw staggered back, red-faced, eyes burning with something between anger and fear. His friends muttered but didn't draw. The drifter turned, helped the boy to his feet, and walked away as if nothing had happened. But everyone watching felt it, the shift in the air, the subtle change that meant Dust Creek had something it hadn't possessed in weeks, a chance. From his vantage by the saloon, Clay Varner watched the scene unfold. His jaw tightened. "Old man's got nerve," he muttered. "Maybe I'll clip his wings before he starts flying, Dot." Back near the well, Mara stood waiting. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "They'll come for you." He gave her that same quiet half-smile. "They've come for me before." And for the first time, she understood the truth behind his calm. Elias Crow wasn't hiding from his past. He was waiting for it to catch up. Clay Varner had never been the kind of man to let defiance slide. The morning after the drifter humiliated his men, he stood outside the saloon, boots planted in the dust, staring toward the horizon where the light was breaking clean and gold over the desert. His men waited, nervous, pretending not to be. Jace Riker leaned against a post, chewing on a piece of straw, trying to look relaxed. But Clay saw the tension in his jaw. "You want to make a name for yourself, Jace," Clay said softly, almost kindly. "Then here's your chance. That old bastard's making me look weak. Go find him. Teach him how this town works." Jace grinned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You want him dead?" Clay's lips curled. "I want him reminded. The rest'll follow." He spat in the dust and turned back toward the bar. "Make it public. Dawn. Let everyone see how heroes die." By the time the first sliver of sunlight crawled over the mesa, Dust Creek was wide awake. Word had spread like brushfire. The Drifter and Jace Riker were set to duel behind the livery. People came quietly, shoulders hunched, unsure if they wanted to witness carriage or a killing. Mara Ellison stood near the back, clutching her shawl tight against the cold morning air. The boy Elias had saved it behind her, eyes wide. Even the sheriff crept out, hat low, shame still clinging to him like a stain. Elias Crow waited by the corral fence, motionless. His hat brim cast a shadow across his face, his coat drawn close, his right hand resting lightly by his side, not on his gun, just near it. Jace strutted into the open, trying to look bigger than his fear. "You sure you're up for this, Oldman?" he called. "Wouldn't want your heart given out before I draw." Elias's voice was steady. "You got a loud mouth for someone still learning how to use it." That brought a ripple of laughter from the crowd, sharp and nervous. Jace's grin twisted. "We'll see who's Logan in a minute." The two men faced each other in the pale dawn light. A single breeze ghosted through the street, whispering over the dust. Then everything went still. The world seemed to hold its breath. Even the horses stopped moving, ears flicking toward the silence. Somewhere, a church bell creaked in the distance. Jace's hand twitched. Elias didn't move. The outlaw drew first, fast, wild, the flash of metal slicing through the stillness. His shot tore the air wide open, echoing off the canyon walls. He missed. Before the smoke even cleared, Elias shifted. It wasn't speed that made it beautiful. It was precision, grace honed by years of survival. His gun seemed to appear from nowhere, the movement smooth and natural as a man lifting a glass of water. One shot cracked. Jay staggered back, eyes wide, gun falling from his fingers. He hit the dirt without a sound. The echo rolled out, then faded into an awful stillness. For a moment no one breathed. Elias stood where he was, gun lowered, smoke drifting from the barrel. His face carried no triumph, no satisfaction, only the weary acceptance of a man who'd done what he'd always done. When he holstered the weapon, the motion was slow, almost reverent. Clay Varner stepped out from the saloon porch, his coat half-buttoned, face pale beneath the stubble. He looked at Jace's body, then at the Drifter. Their eyes locked, two storms colliding in silence. Clay's jaw worked. "You'll pay for that," he said quietly, voice like cracked glass. Elias met his stare. "I already have." The crowd began to scatter, whispers chasing through the dust. Some swore they'd seen a flash of something impossible in that draw, like the air itself had bent around him. Others muttered about the old legends, the gunfighter who'd vanished after 100 duels, the man they'd called the Ghost of Abilene. Mara stayed rooted in place as Elias walked past her, the smell of ginsmoke still clinging to him. She stepped into his path. "Who are you really?" she asked. He paused, eyes drifting toward the mountains as if the answer lived somewhere out there. "Nobody worth remembering," he said finally. But the way his hand trembled slightly as he removed his hat told another story, a story of years spent carrying ghosts that refused to stay buried. Later, inside her cabin, Mara found him sitting by the window, cleaning his revolver. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I did," he murmured. "Men like Riker don't stop unless someone stops him. And his boss, he won't take it kindly." She moved closer. "You've done this before, haven't you?" His hand froze. "Once," he said, voice low. "Too many times." He looked up at her, eyes hollow. "Every time I told myself it'd be the last." Outside, hooves thundered away into the desert. Clay Varner's men were gathering. By dusk, every outlaw within 50 miles would know Dust Creek had defied him. Clay watched the sunset from the edge of town, rage simmering like whiskey over fire. "He thinks killing one of mine makes him safe," he growled to his men. "By nightfall, there won't be a damn thing left of this town but ash. Burn every roof. Drag that Drifter into the street if you find him alive. The red vultures roared their approval, spurred their horses, and vanished into the orange light. Back inside the church, Elias stood in the empty pews, hat in hand. Mara followed him in, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could leave. There's still time." He shook his head. "They'd just follow me. And you'd still be here." He looked around the small, broken sanctuary, the cracked windows, the dust on the altar. "This town deserves better than running dot." Mara's eyes glistened. "You can't fight them all." "Maybe not," he said softly. "But I've been running from ghosts long enough. If they want to fight, they'll have to take it from a man who's already lost everything." She touched his arm gently. "Why stay for us?" Elias turned toward her. For the first time, a hint of warmth reached his tired expression. "Because some places," he said, "ain't worth saving until someone believes they are." As night began to fall over Dust Creek, he walked out to the street where Jace Riker had died that morning. The dust had settled, but the mark of the duel still cut through it like a scar. Elias knelt, brushed his hand over the ground, and whispered something too quiet to catch. Maybe a prayer, maybe a promise. Then he rose, fastened his gun belt, and watched the horizon darken under the weight of gathering riders. For the first time in years, the gun at his side felt alive again. The time for silence had ended. The desert would remember what happened here. Night crept over Dust Creek like a slow tide of ink. The stars hid behind a thin veil of cloud, and the desert wind carried the scent of dust and gunpowder waiting to be spilled. From the ridge beyond the riverbed, a line of torches began to glow. First 5, then a dozen, then a swarm that flickered and swayed like fireflies born of vengeance. The red vultures were coming. The townsfolk had locked their doors and doused their lamps, the silence of prayer and fear settling over every plank and nail. Only one figure stood at the edge of town, where the street met the desert. Elias Crow, coat billowing faintly in the wind, had brim low, the moon at his back like a pale guardian. He checked his gun one last time. The weight of it was familiar, not as a weapon, but as an extension of himself, a tool that had once defined him and nearly destroyed him. His hands didn't shake. They never had. He could hear them now, the distant echo of hooves like thunder rolling closer, a storm made of men. Clay Varner rode at the front, black coat flaring, a torch in one hand and murder in his eyes. Behind him came a dozen riders, rifles slung, pistols glinting in the firelight. The sound of their laughter carried across the sand, sharp, confident, cruel. They expected fear. Instead, they found a man standing alone, unflinching. When the first gunshot cracked the night, the town came alive with chaos. Windows shattered, bullets screamed through the dark, and fire took to the stables. Elias moved like a shadow given purpose. He didn't run. He walked the line between light and dark with terrifying calm. His revolver sang, a single report for every heartbeat. One outlaw fell from his horse, another pitched sideways into the dust. The glow of torches flickered as men stumbled, shouting in confusion. He fought not with fury but with precision. Each shot was chosen, deliberate. The muzzle flash briefly lit his face, a mask of serenity carved from the ashes of 100 gunfights. The townspeople, peering through cracks and shutters, whispered prayers they hadn't spoken in years. To them it looked impossible, the way the old man moved, the way he seemed to sense danger before it arrived. A bullet grazed his shoulder. He didn't flinch. Another ricocheted off the iron water pump behind him. He pivoted, returned fire, dropped him on mid-charge. Gunfire turned to screams. The desert wind, once dry and quiet, now carried the metallic scent of death. Mara Ellison, crouched inside the church with the boy, watched through the broken window as the world outside burned and the stranger she'd come to trust became something mythic, something more than mortal. When the last of the vultures hesitated, Clay Varner's roar cut through the noise. "Enough!" he bellowed. He stepped into the open, smoke curling around him, revolver in hand. His face twisted with rage. "You think killing a few pups makes you a wolf?" Elias reloaded slowly, calm as dawn. "No," he said. "Just makes me the man who stops them." Clay spat, circling. "You should have died with the rest of your kind. Old gunmen like you, just ghosts playing pretend." Elias's eyes met his, pale as morning frost. Ghosts tend to linger until the job's done. The duel began without warning. Clay drew first, a blur of motion, and the night exploded again. Elias sidestepped, the bullet grazing his sleeve. His return shot struck true, slicing through Clay's coat. Clay fired again, missing by inches. Their revolvers flashed like lightning against the black sky, the sound rolling over the town like thunder. They circled each other through smoke and dust, two relics of an age that refused to die. Clay sneered. "You're slow, old man. Ain't like the legends say." Elias's voice was steady. "Age ain't a weakness, not when you've survived enough bullets to tell the tale." He fired once more. The round caught Clay in the chest, spinning him backward. The outlaw stumbled, dropped his gun, and fell hard into the dirt. His torch rolled away, sputtering until it died. Silence fell. Only the crackle of distant flames remained. Elias stood there a long moment, breath even, the gun smoking at his hand. The fight had taken something out of him, something no one could see but everyone could feel. When he finally holstered the weapon, it was like laying a ghost to rest. Mara came running, the boy close behind. She stopped a few paces away, eyes glistening with relief and awe. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head. "No. Just ended what never should have started." As they spoke, the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon. The fire in the stables had burned itself down to embers. The town was scarred, but still standing. Mara looked down and saw something glinting near Elias's coat. A small badge had fallen from his inner pocket, old and dented, its lettering faded by time and blood. She bent and read the inscription, U.S. Marshal, Elias Crow. Her breath caught. "You were Law." He gave a weary half-smile. "Was. Long time ago. Back when I still believed law could keep men like Varner from rising." He took the badge from her hand and turned it over once before tucking it back into his coat. "Some ghosts don't stay buried," he murmured. When the sun broke free of the desert hills, Elias saddled his horse, the same worn creature he'd bought from the livery weeks before. Mara followed him to the edge of town. "You could stay," she said softly. "You've earned peace here." He looked toward the horizon, where the light stretched endless and gold. "Peace don't sit long with men like me," he said. "It moves on, same as the wind." She reached out, touched his arm. "Then may it follow you, at least for a while." He tipped his hat, eyes gentle. "Take care of the boy. He's got more fight in him than this whole town combined." Then he turned his horse toward the desert. The people of Dust Creek watched from their doorways as the old drifter rode into the dawn, his figure shrinking until it became part of the shimmering horizon. Some said they saw the light catch his head just before he vanished, like the sun tipping its brim in farewell. In the years that followed, travelers would pass through and hear the story. They'd stop at the saloon, rebuilt and renamed the Crow's Rest, and ask if it was true, if one man really stood against the red vultures that night. The barkeep would nod, pour a drink, and say, "He came from the desert and left with it." But the desert never forgot his name. And when the wind blew across Dust Creek, whispering through the canyons, it carried with it the faint echo of gunfire and the legend of the men who ended 100 fights, and then disappeared into the dawn.